Hello and welcome to First Chapter Friday. My name is Eva. I'm one of the librarians at the Alameda Free Library, and today I have brought you a very exciting sports book. I know what you're thinking. I am not a huge sports fan. I would much rather read a book than watch a basketball game. But this book was so exciting, so suspenseful, so full of action that I could not put it down. And today I'm going to share a little bit of it with you. It's called Attucks, Oscar Robertson and the Basketball Team That Awakened a City, and it's by Philip Hoose. Let me get it so that you can see the cover. There are the boys on the team and their coach. And I'm going to read to you from the prologue, and then I'm going to jump ahead to Chapter 2. Chapter 1 is very important, and you certainly shouldn't skip it. It's full of information about the Great Migration and also the formation of the Ku Klux Klan in Indiana and Indianapolis in particular, all of which is very important and very relevant to how this book plays out. But I'm going to skip ahead to Chapter 2 so we talk a little bit more about the basketball. All right, starting with the prologue. Flap's shot. There is a picture of Flap taking the shot. The fence was a tired old play, used to score the last basket at the end of a close game. The team's tallest player took the ball out of bounds under his team's basket, while his four teammates stood shoulder to shoulder at the free throw line, forming a wall in front of the opposing players guarding them. The tall passer looped the ball over the human wall to the team's best shooter, who stepped back from the fence formation to receive the pass and take the last shot. It was one of the oldest plays in basketball. Everyone knew it, including Anderson High. But that was the play Crispus Attucks' coach Ray Crow had drawn up with Attucks possessing the ball and behind by 1 point, 80-79, with 7 seconds left. The play was designed for the team's best shooter, Hallie Bryant, to step back from the fence and take the crucial shot. The referee handed the ball to Attucks center Bob Jewell, who stood out of bounds beneath Attucks' basket, holding the ball with 2 hands above his head. The ref blew his whistle to begin the most important 7 seconds in the history of basketball in Indianapolis. The play was a disaster from the first tick. Anderson had it deciphered perfectly, guarding Hallie Bryant too tightly for Jewell to reach him with a pass. Bailey Robertson, a reserve guard whom everyone called Flap, was the first to sense disaster. With no time to lose, he broke from the fence, sprinted to the right corner, and turned to face Jewell. Jewell, out of options, whipped the ball across his body to Flap Robertson, who caught it, squared his body to support the shot, aimed, jumped as high as he could, and launched the ball with his right hand. 24 years of community struggle rested on the shot as it spun tightly above the Butler Fieldhouse floor. A quarter-century's progress hung in the balance as Flap's wrist remained frozen in a classic shooter's follow-through. The now descending shot, if it fell through the hoop, would answer those who had built a school to fail in a hateful atmosphere, would speak to those who kept Attucks High from playing in the tournament for 15 years, would reply to those who felt that black athletes would wilt under pressure. Flap Robertson's shot was a once-in-a-lifetime, all-or-nothing bid for respect. As with many legendary events, the details of what happened next are open to debate. Oscar Robertson, Flap's then 12-year-old brother, who a decade later would be known throughout America as the Big O, was watching the 1951 Indianapolis Regional Championship game at home on TV with his mom and brother Henry. 35 years later, he remembered Flap's shot as a Hail Mary, one that struck the rim, bounced up, and fell straight down through the net. Hallie Bryant, the fence's play's intended receiver, recalled that the ball rattled around the hoop before dropping through, almost of fatigue. But for the rest of his life, Flap Robertson would have none of that. Nothing but net, he recalled years later to an interviewer, nodding vigorously. People told me their relatives died of heart attacks. One lady said she started to go into labor when the ball went through. And ever since I've asked myself, why me? Well, there's no answer. I wasn't even on the starting team. I guess that fate just said, go in, Flap. Fate's broad smile that day reached Flap's youngest brother as well. After Flap's shot, Oscar Robertson later wrote, "Things would never be the same again for me. I knew it. For the first time, a candle of hope flickered inside my heart." All right, I'm jumping ahead to chapter 2 and Hoosier Hysteria. And right there you can see a picture of King Arthur Tressler. Trester. I keep saying his name wrong. It's Trester. In the late summer of 1927, a few days after Indianapolis's Crispus Attucks High opened its door to its first students, a trio of respected black leaders admiringly known as the Big Three, F.E. DeFranz, Reverend H.L. Herod, and F.B. Ransom, motored to Anderson, Indiana to apply in person for Attucks's membership in the Indiana High School Athletic Association, the IHSAA. The IHSAA governed high school sports in Indiana. Membership would give Attucks High the chance to compete in sports events against the other schools of the state. Importantly, it would give Attucks the chance to play in Indiana's nationally famous high school basketball tournament, the biggest hoops show on earth. That would let everyone know that Attucks's athletes, regardless of the color of their skin, belonged to Indiana's family of schools. The Big Three were shown into the office of the IHSAA's permanent secretary, Arthur Trester. Now in his 11th year on the job, Trester had ridden the Indiana high school basketball tournament to fame and almost dictatorial power. He was widely known as King Arthur and the Czar of the IHSAA. One newspaper caricatured him sitting on a globe and wearing a top hat with his arms crossed. That seemed about right. Square-shouldered, jut-jawed, and bulky, he signaled blunt authority. More than any other individual, Arthur Trester had made Indiana America's basketball crossroads. The game had been invented in a Massachusetts YMCA in 1891. Its originator, physical education teacher James Naismith, saw basketball as something that city kids could do indoors in winter. 2 years later, the game reached Indiana and proved just as good a fit for Hoosier farm boys. Basketball gave them something to do between fall harvesting and spring planting of crops. Most Indiana towns were too small in those years to produce football teams and too poor to buy the pads and helmets anyway. But basketball only required 5 players on a team and very little equipment. Players could practice on their own simply by nailing a hoop to a barn or a woodshed. The game could be played outdoors or indoors. Indiana's state high school basketball tournament began in 1911 when 13 teams, one from each Hoosier congressional district, were invited to compete in a single elimination tournament at the Bloomington campus of Indiana University, or IU. The winner would be crowned state champion. The event was for boys only, even though some Indiana schools already had girls' team. It would take another 65 years and an act of Congress for girls to get a tourney of their own in Indiana. Fans packed the IU Fieldhouse for the first tournament. Even more came the next year. The third year's event showcased Indiana's first basketball superstar, a lanky farm boy named Homer Stonebreaker, who had learned to shoot by flinging a small rubber ball through a hoop nailed to his barn. Stoney, as everyone called him, had no idea how good he had become, but by the time he was old enough for Wingate High, Stoney could shoot accurately from almost any place on a basketball floor. In the second game of the season, he shocked basketball fans throughout Indiana by scoring 80 points all by himself. Fevered curiosity about Stoney and the gymless wonders swept through the state and attracted mobs to Bloomington in March. Stoney turned out to be even better than advertised. Wingate won both the 1913 and 1914 state championship tournaments. In one quarterfinal game, Stoney scored every one of his team's points. Hoosier hysteria was born. In the next decade alone, tournament entries increased from 13 schools to 394. Communities built gyms that seated several times the school's enrollment, sometimes even more than the town's entire population, not only to accommodate all the basketball friends from outlying areas who lived for Friday night, but also to seize the home court advantage in the first or sectional round of the tourney. Gym wars erupted. Little towns spent public funds earmarked for road repair and bridge construction to build outsized gyms instead. Soon, nearly all the big gyms in the United States were in Indiana. Newcastle, Elkhart, Michigan City, Lafayette. These were just some of the Indiana communities that built high school gyms that would hold 7,000 fans or more. These weren't multi-purpose community centers. They were basketball palaces. During one 1929 meeting in the Muncie, Indiana, the Muncie, Indiana City Council allocated $100,000 to build a basketball field house that would seat 7,400 fans, and then refused to put up $300 to hire a librarian. Winning tournament games became everything to Hoosiers. It was the way to put your school on the map, the way to gain respect. Town merchants rewarded winning high school coaches with bonuses, in one case a Pontiac sedan. Winning players got gold watches, coaches combed the hills and flatlands for any tall boy who could shoot, offering his parents well-paying jobs if they would just uproot the family and move to their town. Many players were in their early 20s. Some were married. Some hadn't passed a single subject in school. The Indiana High School Athletic Association, established in 1903 to regulate high school sports in the state, stood powerless to police the monster it had created. In 1916, the IHSAA executives threw up their hands and hired a lawman to clean up the mess. Arthur L. Trester, then 38, was an obvious choice. An ex-high school principal and school superintendent, Trester was a man to whom the mechanics of power came naturally. His first move was to appoint his most trusted friends to the Board of Control. Soon after, critics were calling them the Board of Controlled. By 1927, the year he met with the three black supplicants representing the new all-black Crispus Attucks High School, Arthur Trester wielded an absolute power over high school sports in Indiana. Anyone accused of breaking an IHSAA rule was summoned to Trester's office for a hearing. There, King Arthur sat unblinking as the accused stammered their excuses and denials through dry, trembling lips. He usually heard them out and then banned them from competition, sending them out the door with his pet slogan, "The rules are clear and the penalties severe." No written record of his meeting with the Big Three about Crispus Attucks High survives, but it's not too hard to imagine how it went. And that is how Attucks, Oscar Robertson, and the basketball team that awakened a city begins. I hope you will keep reading. It will give you a whole new idea of what life in the North was like, what the Great Migration accomplished, what basketball means to Indiana, and what basketball could mean to an entire community. Interesting, interesting stuff. I hope you read it. I hope you enjoy it. You can go online to our website right now, alamedafree.org, to place a hold on this book so that you can be the one to read it next. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.